Hello and welcome to an episode of The Grafter Show. In this episode, I sat down with my friend Olu and we spoke about his clothing brand Furisto London. We spoke about how he got started, the creative side of things, how he continues on that journey, and different aspects of his motivation, his why, how he goes about his routine as well in order to achieve his goals. So without further ado, here's the episode. Hello and welcome to an episode of The Grafter Show. I'm Shabir. Today I'm joined by Olu and we're going to be talking about entrepreneurship. Olu, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hey Shabir. My name is Olu, as Shabir already mentioned. So yeah, currently a QA working at YNAP, which is Yuke's Net-a-Porter. In my spare time, what do I like doing? Designing, pretty much. Yeah, creative arts is kind of what I'm into, yeah.
And then obviously you've taken that creativity one step forward as well. It's not just about maybe designing art stuff or graphic design or anything like that. You've gone a step forward and you've actually gone and created your own clothing line.
Exactly, yeah. So I guess the reason why I went into a clothing line was I was a consumer. That's the best way to put it. I was a consumer. I used to buy a lot of clothes, and at uni, my friend was doing a night for like promoting, and I essentially just got some t-shirts made up. People loved it. So yeah, from there I just started making a few samples. People used to love it a bit more, and they're like, why don't you start your own clothing thing? And that's kind of what led me down that avenue. Yeah, it was just by mistake.
Let's break that down, because obviously when you say it like that, it sounds like really simple. Made a few clothes and now you're running a clothing line. Yeah. Let's take it all the way back to the beginning, because actually when you start probably thinking about it, there's so many steps involved to even doing that one promotional t-shirt. How did you find that? Like, where did you start?
So many issues. Where to start? So I actually started there's a clothing manufacturer called Gildan, which produced like blanks for t-shirts. So the idea was to get 25 t-shirts just as a little promotional run. One of the issues I had was about sizing, just because what was advertised on the actual t-shirt was not people's body types. So yeah, just giving someone a large was not actually, it was like an extra large. So that was one of the things. So just learning around a bit more about sizing. Another issues I kind of encountered in that first run for the promotional stuff was the types of printing. Yeah. So there's so many various types of printing which you could effectively do for garment production. So like screen printing ended up being the best option, but was also the most expensive option.
Okay.
So there was a number of issues based on the quantity I wanted to actually produce was below the minimum quantity of that printing company. So kind of had to negotiate, obviously pay a little bit more of a higher price. So yeah, there was some like teething problems in the beginning, but all the t-shirts went. So it's kind of a learning curve, a massive learning curve.
So you did this for a friend.
Yeah.
Did they actually give you the money to go do this, or did they set a budget? How did that work?
So the budget was exceeded quite quickly, but there was a bit more incentive because I was able to bring, I think, 4 people to the night for free. So that was kind of like an incentive, and I was like drinks thrown in as well. So there was, I think for me, I was getting a good deal at the time because it seemed like an easy thing to do, print out some t-shirts for my friend. But in hindsight, maybe I should have got some money up front.
So just to recap that though, you basically had a friend who asked you, make some t-shirts, I'm gonna give you free access to this event, bring some friends along, throw in some drinks and whatever.
Pretty much,
and that was it. That was your first kind of gig and foray into making your own clothes, I guess, and starting clothing line.
That's
so after that experience then, what actually prompted you to then actually say, okay, I've done this as a one-off, I now want to take it a step further?
I think the actual prompt, I left uni and I essentially moved into a house where a lot of my friends from uni were like creatives. So a few of my friends were like actual designers and graphic designers for, I think one of my friends worked for a really big like cartoon illustration. It was like a monster something. So it was like a child illustration thing. So I'd be like working in IT and then come back home and just see like all this creative stuff going on. And they'd be like, Ollie, what are you doing? Like you can obviously like design and make clothes, so you should like utilize this. So I think just being around that in that environment just encouraged me to but to go ahead with it. Also, I've got like a young sister, so she's into creative stuff as well. So I think like her growing up and me sort of being the older brother was like we'd go to museums and stuff like that. So her sort of interest inspired me a bit more to see like, oh right. And like when I was growing up, right, my family's they're first generation from Africa where education is everything. So saying that you want to go and do an art degree is like, it's alien to them. It's so foreign. So I think I was kind of like ahead of my time in terms of like for my parents. Whereas like my sister came along and was like, yeah, you can go and do art. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know, maybe if I was like the last born, it would be different. But sorry, I went off on the tangent there.
No, that's fine.
But yeah, the point was it was a number of things. It was trying to ignore it for so long where you just have to do it. And obviously my sister being in that interest, asking me questions, I felt like I needed to find out these things. So when she's ready to come along, I've got the answers.
Yeah.
So it's kind of...
That's a really good point. Obviously, surrounding yourself with people who will help you achieve that goal.
It's so crucial. It's so crucial because now I'm kind of removed from that environment. It's a lot harder to motivate yourself. Your inspiration, you have to go out and seek inspiration. Yeah. Whereas I was just like stumbling into inspiration. Yeah. So it's more like a pre-thought. I need to go somewhere to get inspired. Yeah. Whereas I think having people around you, it just like, what's that saying? Iron sharpens iron, right? Mm-hmm. So do you know what I mean? You need people of the same caliber. And it just makes you better.
Yeah, it's just, I guess it just instantly gets you in the zone and gets you in the right mindset to do those things. Whereas when you're completely detached from that, it's really hard to actually get in to that first step to actually do anything.
It's like channeling that creativity. Yeah.
So I was going to actually get onto the motivation part a bit later, but we've already touched on it, so let's get into that now. Mm-hmm. Given that you're not in that environment, but you're still keeping your clothing brand going, how do you actually stay motivated?
I stay motivated now because I've got to a point where I can't really back down because like I've put product into the world, so people are expecting it now. People are like, Olu, when's the next thing coming out? So that's a motivating factor, as well as what I'm doing, is it giving any benefit to the world? Mm-hmm. Sometimes you feel like sometimes you feel like no. So you have those like natural highs and lows. But I think the motivation is, at the end of the day, I buy clothes, so I'd rather buy my own clothes because do you know what I mean? Like I can see something and be like, I like that. I know how to make that. So why not just make it, as opposed to, do you know what I mean? Yeah. Buying something else. So that's kind of my motivation.
I think I can't remember who exactly said this, but someone, an entrepreneur, basically said something quite similar, where don't go out to find that product that you want to sell, but actually look at what product is actually going to help you in your life, and then build that product. Because if you know that you want it, for sure there are going to be other people out there who want it as well. So that's the mindset that you've taken, and that's effectively your why to your clothing brand. It's, I want these clothes, I currently do not see them out on the market, therefore I'm going to make them, I'm going to wear them as well, and I'm going to sell them.
And this is the thing, and like when I first started this, it was always a benefit for me, because like if I never sold one t-shirt, I could wear the clothes. Do you know what I'm saying? So I was like, worst case scenario, I'll just have clothes. Exactly. And it's just like the end result is achieved anyway. Do you know what I mean? So there was more pros to doing it as opposed to cons. So
fair enough. Let's go to the actual clothing line now as well. So tell us about it.
Yes.
Obviously, I know what it's called.
Yeah, cool. So it's called Furisto London. The reason why I picked Furisto, because that means prince. So the idea was to have sort of a line which is for people that are upcoming in their life, so feeling that they're about to achieve their ultimate goal. So having a line that embodies that, as well as it being sort of a London-based brand which incorporates all these subcultures, so like art, music, just all the cool things into one brand. So that was the niche I was kind of going for. Not kind of going for, but I'm actually doing. The reason why that name came about was a really random story. So this is the time where I'd left uni and I was kind of just like working a few jobs before I got into IT, and it was a day off because I was working as an agency worker, and I was watching this documentary about horse racing. Right, so I was watching, this sounds random, but you know, I like watching random stuff about knowledge, and one of the top breeds of horses was called Furisto. And I was kind of like just looking into like where this term came from. And it stemmed from a German term for first, which means king. And Furisto means prince. I was just like, obviously we're not king right now, but I think a prince is a better journey, because when you're a king, you just hear about being a king, but as a prince, you hear about. So I feel like that's what this whole brand is embodying. Yeah.
That fits into the podcast really well in terms of the whole podcast. The reason why I'm doing this podcast is all about the journeys that people are on. So actually, you're the clothing version of the podcast.
Amazing. Conceptualized.
Exactly. Yeah. And so obviously you did that gig quite a little while ago. What was the sort of time frame you're looking at from going from that gig to launching like your very first line, and then how have things grown from then? Like what's that journey look like?
Okay, so every collection is a journey in itself, because you are dealing with production schedules, failed samples. So you might make a t-shirt which like graphically looks amazing, but then when you actually produce that t-shirt, it's not what you envisioned, so you just have to scrap that. So I guess to answer your question, it was like, sorry to reiterate that, because I just went off in my own.
What was the timeline?
The timeline
from that first gig you did in terms of making some t-shirts for your friend for that event, going to your first collection, and then subsequently the journey since then?
3 years, I'd say.
Wow.
I'd say it was really long, because I didn't know if I wanted to do it. It was only, I'll tell you sort of the timeline. So I left uni, and then a year later, I was watching that documentary. So I came up with the name for such a long time. I had the name for like probably about a year before I did anything with it. So once I did have the name, after that year, I started making samples, and I was just trying to like learn like what fabrics and stuff like that. I didn't want to just push stuff out into the world, not knowing it was something I wouldn't buy essentially. So I think that sampling process took so long, and then I got my first like career job in IT, so my focus shifted a bit more to like learning that, and then I think the first line actually came out 2015, I want to say 2015. I can check, but
okay,
I'll check
that's fine.
Yeah, 2015. So maybe it wasn't 3 years; it was 2 years actually.
Okay,
it was 2 years, but that seems like eternity when you're trying to build a product and you're like, oh my god, when is this actually going to materialize? So yeah, got the first collection out, and I feel like that was a massive milestone, just getting that first one out, because it was the first of everything. It's like the first bulk order I've ever done, so there was problems with like shipping. I'll tell you stories, so like so many stories. Hats, right? Packaging of hats is a really difficult thing to do when you're shipping it from China to the UK. Just if you imagine your daily post, like sometimes it comes, it's like ripped.
Yeah.
So imagine that with a product which you're trying to resell.
No.
So you have to account for like loss of some of your products.
Yeah.
And even if you do get reimbursed for that product, it's going to be a month later, because the production has to be obviously factored in. So yeah, there's so many things you have to factor in terms of like basic profit margins. How many hats will I need to essentially sell to cover the cost of those lost hats? So there's so many different things you learn just going through this journey. But sorry, to answer your question, it took about 2 years.
And then since then, so you're now into your third year.
Yeah.
Like how many different collections and seasonal stuff have you done?
So started off doing like one collection a year. So now I've done 4 collections. The idea is now to go into more seasonal collections. So the reason why it's taken so long is because one, it's just me. So I'm like designing as well as doing logistics and packaging and like marketing and all of that. I'm currently
full
just
end-to-end
literally
dealing
is
with
all in my
commercial
head.
business.
Yeah, it's literally all in my head. So one person doing that obviously just makes things longer. And sometimes when you're trying to hit production lines, sometimes you miss it. So I might have a winter jacket ready to go, but production doesn't happen until say like December, which is a bad time because no one's really buying anything.
Yeah.
January comes along, no one's going to buy anything. Really, you might get it. And then you've got February, which in China is Chinese New Year, which means nothing gets made in February. So then you're looking at March, which is like springtime. So you've kind of missed that whole window.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's all about aligning your production timelines to the hiccups they might have, as well as there's so many things you need to factor in.
And I guess like a lot of people who might be thinking about doing like a clothing business or something, they might not even think about this. They might be thinking, oh, I've got some designs in my head, let me just get a graphic design or something to put that on a paper, and then all I need to do is send it to a printer. But then I guess you're talking about a significant quantity to actually be produced, and to obviously get them at a good enough price to sell them on market then as well, and fitting all of that together is where the challenge actually is. Yeah,
exactly. And it's like because you could just get t-shirts and print them up, like heat press them, but then are you trying to build a brand or are you just trying to sell t-shirts? And that was the sort of different route I had to take. I had to make that sort of differentiation between, do I just want to produce t-shirts or do I want to build a brand? And when you go down the route of building a brand, it just makes everything longer because you have to think about cohesiveness, how this all fits into everything. So yeah, that's one of the things to definitely think about if you're going to start a clothing brand is, do you see yourself doing this in 5 years? Because it's going to be a lot of lost money, a lot of lost hours. Just, it seems like there's probably more heartache in the beginning before you get to the big, do you know what I mean? So yeah.
So there's a lot of effort that has to go in at the beginning and very little to see for it until that point where you know, maybe your first collection is out and selling really well, and that could take quite a bit of time, and especially like some of the challenges you're describing around like the production lines and other stuff is pretty tough. And then obviously you said you're doing this all by yourself right at the moment, but I'm assuming you're getting helping hands in different places. What are the main areas that you get help from, and who do you normally end up, or what type of people do you end up reaching out to?
So I mentioned those people I used to live with in a house, those creative people from uni. So one of my friends, Dan, he's more like a sounding board in terms of if I've got an idea and it needs to be refined, I send it to him. I'm like, what do you think about this? And he'll kind of like refine and say, you need to do that, do that. And then obviously I've got my sister as well. She's like, she doesn't really have a title, but she kind of does work in my business. She's kind of like, for example, last week we went fabric shopping. So she's another one that I bounce ideas off, as well as she does a lot of my social media stuff, in terms of like hashtag and like what we call it, like social engineering. She does a lot of that, but I need to, I think my plan is to essentially get the product line mapped out so I can just drop a product in and it just get manufactured all the way through. Once I can get that kind of more streamlined, then the idea is to bring more people in and it can just be a running thing. Going back to streamlining this whole production thing, there is an issue with sort of doing it in China, because doing it in China is fine in terms of like price points, but geographically it's a lot harder to make a change.
Yeah. Because
there's also the language barrier for one, time difference, and just like, saying you want to change on something, they have to obviously do it. And then, whereas if you've got production in England, which I have for certain items, the feedback loop is so much quicker. So it's just getting a balance between what items need to be made in the UK, what needs to be made in China, what needs to be made in Turkey.
So how do you actually balance your time? Because obviously, like you said earlier, you're working full time and you're still working full time, and then you're doing this as well. You know, someone listening is probably thinking your clothing stuff, surely that's a full-time job in itself, which it is time-wise.
It is,
But then how are you managing to balance
it's
your
like
time?
You do a 9 to 5 and a 5 to 9. That's a good question. I think it's so ingrained in my life now where all the production managers are on my phone, so I WhatsApp them, which means with China and India I have to wake up really early to get stuff set up for the day, because if you start messaging them at 11 a.m. our time, that means it's not going to get done for the next day.
Yeah.
So it's just about, I just have my things. I wake up in the morning, I message people in China, India, just to like get a progress check. So it's like a stand-up essentially.
Yeah.
So I apply, best way to put it is I apply stuff I've learned within tech into my clothing business. So having like swim lanes and just status reports on each thing. How do you find the time? I think the thing is, if you really want to do something, you will find the time. I think I've never understood that until I actually found something I really wanted to do. So sacrifice. I will say there's so much sacrifice that I've made, and like, I know this is going to sound really crazy, but you lose friends. Because your thoughts are, it's constant. Your thoughts are constant. So I might be out at dinner and I'll be like, oh my days, I really wish that my laptop was here so I could just... And sometimes that makes you switch off a bit because you're thinking about, I could be at home working. And on the flip side, sometimes you don't go out because you need to be at home, and friends will not necessarily understand that. But I think it takes a while for them to understand what you're trying to achieve, and when they start seeing product coming up, they're like, I get it now, I get what you're doing. So
that's an interesting point you touched on. Have you actually faced like negative remarks or points of view, especially from those close to you?
Totally.
And then how have you dealt with that? Because that's probably something that a lot of people potentially could face. 100%. And like they're thinking about, let me start something, I want to start this business, I've got this idea or whatever, but I'm really worried about what my family or my friends or those close around me might think. I
would say, it's going to sound harsh, if you're scared of people laughing at you, then don't do this. Because in the beginning, people will laugh at you. Like your best friends, like, I remember one of my friends, it's so funny now because he loves my stuff, but when he first come out, he was like, all it is just like stuff printed on t-shirts. I was like, okay. Which is, to be fair, that's a fair point. But as it progressed, he was like, when can I get some of your stuff? I was like, if I had listened to you in the beginning, I would have stopped. So you need to have thick skin, but you develop that as you just get all these like setbacks. You will have your best friend and your mum and your dad.
Do you have any tips for that? Because I think I've personally gone through similar stuff as well before, where I've been like, I want to do this, but I don't know what other people might think, or I want to start something, but is that going to, make someone feel differently about me or anything along those lines? What tips would you share for people who are in that position, or they have that sort of mindset, I guess?
Yeah. I think 90% of people have this mindset, and they let that mindset dictate to them before they even try. I would rather try something and fail at it, knowing, but this is a mindset that I think I've kind of like built. I wasn't born with this mindset. I don't think anyone's built with that mindset. Do you know what I mean? So I would say there's a number of ways that I would say of how to overcome that. I think you need to find like a core set of friends that are on a similar journey, because then they can understand what you're going through, and they will be the people that you can kind of like just use as a sounding board. So I would say if you are an entrepreneur and you look around and there's no other people that are entrepreneurs, you need to find some quickly, because you will get discouraged very quickly. Another thing I would say is you've got to believe in some higher power. You've got to have faith. You have to, bro. You have to. You might not be religious, but you might need to pray. Do you know what I mean? Because like...
No, that's a really good point you touched on.
It's because some things are... You can't see them, right? So if you're trying to work towards something you can't see, you have to have faith, right? Ultimately, you need to believe that what you're doing is worth doing it. So
that's a really interesting point you touched on, because I remember I think I was reading something around common behaviors that executives at top companies do, and I think one thing that is always there is some form of meditation.
Definitely. And
it's not that they're all religious or they believe in anything in particular, but it's actually more around the fact that helps them get in the right mindset to achieve their goals, and actually, like you're saying, believe that they are able to achieve those goals.
Because it's like your inner voice. What happens is a lot of people block out their inner voice, and when people say trust your gut instinct, I think we downplay that. Like, if you feel something in your gut, investigate that, because it's gonna be like 98% true in like just in life and like dealing with people, just like dealing with situations. When I'm usually like, something's a bit off here, it does manifest later on. I'm like, I knew that, but I chose to ignore that. So I think, you need to trust in yourself ultimately, because if you don't, no one else is going to believe in you.
Absolutely.
And at those dark moments, you're at home at like 2 o'clock in the morning, like trying to make a design. You need to like believe in yourself, otherwise you're just going to give up.
I think that's the same advice I'd probably relate to someone who is scared of taking that very first step as well. So whether they are already on the journey and then trying to find that self-belief in them, or whether they are right at the beginning where they're not even sure if they want to take that first step, it's like you have to believe that you're able to do this. Because I've seen, and I'm sure like you've also seen some people who they are clearly not happy with what they do, but they desperately want to do something else, but it's almost like they're too afraid to take that first step.
True.
And I'm sure part of that is because they're afraid what other people might think, or they don't have that self-belief, and they're not willing to take that step.
I agree with that. And I feel like some people haven't found what it is they want to do. A lot of people are like, I want to do something, but I don't know what it is. So I think you need to listen to your inner voice. Like, your passion, what you like doing for free, you should try and find a way of monetizing that. Because like when there's no money, you need to still do this until you get money out of it. Do you know what I mean? I'm not saying this is my end goal is to get money. My end goal is to just create stuff. Like, I just like creating stuff. So that's my end goal. If people like it, that's amazing. Do you know what I mean? Like I said, if the clothes don't sell, I just get to wear loads of clothes. But fortunately, obviously, stuff is selling.
That's a great mindset to have.
I think that's the best, because then you don't lose that way. You're not like, you're not so upset and chasing the dragon that's not there. Do you know what I mean? You've actually got a purpose, because once you've got a purpose, everything else just falls into place.
Yeah, definitely. I can really relate to this, because I've seen so many people who are just not willing to go there and take that step and actually believe in themselves. Absolutely, it's all about having that mindset. So I think we've touched on quite a few different things. I'm really interested in you telling us about, what would you say are the top 3 things that you've learned from your journey so far that other people could really benefit from?
Top 3 things. Only 3? Or just...
I'll
start with 3.
The reason why I say 3 is obviously so you can really prioritise the really good ones at the top that might be helpful to people.
Patience.
Especially
when you are creating something, say in Photoshop or Illustrator, and it's on a piece of it's on a file. That going from that point to an actual sample is not the end. People need to realize, making that sample, going from this to that can take months. Because you might make one sample, but you're so sure of this idea, you're going to keep tweaking it. So you might make 5 iterations of one sample, which takes time and money. So that's patience is a key thing, number 1. Second, it's going to sound very shallow, but you need funding. You need a way of getting your idea to the market. I think patience, funding. I think having a purpose. So patience, funding, and having a purpose of what you're trying to achieve. I've kind of touched on this already, but because I think actually having a purpose is number 1. The purpose supersedes everything, because if you don't have a purpose, then you're just aimlessly trying to create something that might not be receptive in the market. So I'll rejig those.
And that's such a common thing with entrepreneurs everywhere, where it's all about what is your why? Why are you doing this? And I think people get caught up in just trying to put a couple of sentences together to answer that question, but it's actually a lot deeper than that. It's all about what is actually fueling you to get up in the morning, often before other people are even out of bed.
I agree,
and get to work straight on this pretty much. What is that why? And people often think it's, my why is I want to make money. But actually, you'd still end up probably sleeping until about 10, 11 a.m. if you could. So that's not your why.
And that's not a why. Because you could work in a high paid job.
You
could make loads of money, but money's not the absolute.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think that's something that really isn't emphasized enough, or it isn't properly explained to people about what is your why. What does that actually even mean, rather than just trying to come up with a 1-liner or 2-liner, whatever it is, a generic, my why for this company is I want to be the best clothing brand in the world. But why do you want to do that?
I think you start off with that sort of
Yeah, it might take revisions.
It does.
It does take revisions.
Once
it
you
takes
go
a bit
through
of
that journey,
it's almost like a bit of soul searching for yourself. Like you need to probably meditate on this and actually really do some deep thinking about it. And I think a lot of people don't do that. They start the journey and then they end up like, you know, kind of like a third there,
and they get frustrated,
and then they get frustrated,
exactly.
They give up, and that's where you often see failed businesses because they haven't figured out that key question of their why, which is ultimately going to be their motivating factor and probably the difference between success and failure as well.
Totally. It's like persistence. Oh, that would be another one. That's
I was actually thinking that in my head because I'm someone who actually really believes in like consistency and persistency. That's like, something that I preach about a lot myself in like talks that I've given and when I've worked with teams. That's something that I really, it's not about having, you know, spikes off, you know, real big effort, but then for the next, you know, several weeks, nothing's happening. So it's all about the consistency and being persistent with your effort.
I think the flip side of patience is what I was saying. It's like persistence, because like obviously you're gonna hit these like fallbacks, but
you have to keep going.
You've got to persevere. Exactly.
Going.
So patience, persistence.
And I think like some people think, and this is something I probably see online quite a lot, where people make these like huge to-do lists and they're like, I have to get all of this done in one day. Actually, if you're achieving small things but on a regular basis, that's a lot more productive and it's better to your own well-being than trying to create this humongous list.
Fatigue.
And then
it's one thing
either fatiguing yourself or even having a negative mindset and, you know, finishing your day thinking I didn't get enough done, and that really impacts your mindset and makes you think that you can't achieve. And that's something that I've noticed, and I think it happens a lot online because you see people, you know, posting pictures about this is all the things I want to get done today, and often you don't really see how much they got done or didn't get done. But then it's almost like, oh, I've got to do so much stuff this week or whatever. Setting goals is fine, but set realistic goals. Set goals that are achievable.
To touch on that point, I've got two lists. I've got a high level list and I've got, like you say, daily, a smaller list of stuff I need to achieve. So like, for example, high level list might be samples for spring summer 18 by December. A lower list would be send designs to such and such. Do you know what I mean? So you have the overall arcing goal, but you need to have a smaller list.
Yeah, definitely.
Otherwise,
I've even got the same for this podcast. So people think that I literally just rock up with a microphone and just record stuff, but a lot of planning goes into it, and there's a lot of behind the scenes prep work that has to go into it before I can even hit the record button, and then post as well. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that goes on, and I have to manage that at both, like you're saying, a high level plan of all the things with a calendar view and everything, and then a micro level in terms of these are the daily things that I want to achieve. So you can apply that principle and practice to all sorts of things, but super key, I guess, for someone obviously looking to start a business, or even in your case like a clothing line. So one thing I did want to ask, this is probably quite an interesting one, is around the accounting side of things. So you mentioned that you're doing absolutely everything yourself. For someone new to starting a business, I think quite often accounting and the finance side is overwhelming, something that they're not even sure where to start. So what would you advise, or what did you do?
So there's a number of things you can do in terms of accounting. I'm kind of lucky because my brother's an accountant, so I can just call him and be
keep
like,
the business in the family, right?
You know, I'm like, bro, I need you to kind of look at this. To be fair, there's like a threshold that you need to sort of hit before you need to start worrying about, like, you know, doing your VAT returns and stuff like that. I would say obviously register your business. One of those things, register it, whatever you do, like limited company, yada yada yada. But in terms of what managing finances, it's a tough one because it varies on what item you're trying to produce and what kind of embroidery or like printing, or you're doing a mix of embroidery and printing. So usually how it goes is you speak to a sort of manufacturer and you say, I want to produce X amount of these items at, what's your unit price essentially? They'll tell you their unit price. You'll kind of like negotiate, try and get it down to obviously the best price for you. But then you obviously have a sample price as well. So you pay the sample price, that comes back, you assure that. And then you talk about your unit prices. Obviously the bigger the quantity, the less the unit price, but then you've got to worry about selling 1,000 as opposed to selling 200. So you kind of need to put a compromise. So to answer your question in terms of finances, it's very variable depending on like your collection, and my prices have started to get bigger because fan base has got bigger, so you can produce more products as well as you're trying to do a bit more intricate because you're growing the brand.
Yeah.
So it's so variable with a clothing line. It's not like a constant.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like a water bottling company.
Are you letting your brother actually do the kind of accounting and all of that stuff?
Sort of. Well, I kind of do it myself as well because I'm kind of like well versed in that, because my day job obviously requires me to like look after my own finances. So I guess it's just using the skills I've got in my career and applying it to another business.
For someone looking to start though, is it, like you said, you don't need to worry about it straight away, but let's say, you know, they start getting to that point where, hey, I need to take my finances a bit seriously. I can't just, you know, not really care. I've got some money getting sent over there for like a production or whatever, not really keeping track of it or anything like that. What would you recommend or suggest for that person who's just starting to get to that point where, hey, I need to start taking this seriously?
For tracking, I would say you definitely need to be logging what prices you're paying, what unit price you're paying, what manufacturers you're using. Get a log of that. Essentially, I've got everything logged, so I know how much I paid for a sample in like 2015 as opposed to how much I'm paying now. So yeah, you just need to document most of the things. Once you've got that documented, you have more of a basis to negotiate. To be like, why are you charging me X amount when I paid such and such?
And I guess that's as simple as just making a note of it in a spreadsheet as well over time.
Google
right?
Docs is because on the go. I need to look at this on the go, so I have it in a Google Docs essentially.
Fair enough.
And I think just having that logged is so crucial. Yeah.
Absolutely. Is there any other advice that you give in terms of like managing finances or dealing with accounts related stuff?
Yeah, you need to plan at least 6 months ahead, because if you want to put out a collection, you're going to have to make a bulk payment. So if you know you want to put out 5 items, you need to price that up and have that money ready to go.
Yeah.
So yeah, always be thinking 6 months ahead at least in terms of like how much you're going to be spending.
Yeah, and I guess that's probably not even true of just finances, but everything from a business wise, because if you're thinking financially, what's the impact going to be in a 6 month time period? You also probably need to plan what products need to go out, what's my, I don't know, social media campaigns going to look like, my marketing stuff, any other activities that you might want to be doing. You need to plan all of that. So you need to get your strategic cap on.
Very strategic,
planning things in advance. And just on that, so I guess, you know, you mentioned before you've got, you know, social media channels and you do other stuff as well. How do you manage all of that? Like, do you have like a calendar view of this?
In terms of like managing social media? Or
no, so just all of these different strategic activities, I guess, that you have to do.
I've kind of got like a high level production. Like I said, I've got like a swim lane sort of board, and I kind of broke it. I've got 2 boards, to be fair. I've got one which is very high level, which is like doing, done. And then I've got more of like a granular level one where stuff that's actually within the do and what I'm doing, if that makes sense. So I'll give you an example. So like I'll go back to high level on my doing, done board. One of the first ones in the do was decide out of the 15 products, which ones I actually want to bring into the collection. So you make samples of loads of products and then you start to pull it together to like a more cohesive, what's the word I'm looking for? More cohesive like theme. Once you've got a theme, the idea is to get that cohesive and then just have that on a board. So there's a lot of like visual printouts and just having, I've got loads of boards of just like printouts and stuff to do, stuff to not do, I guess, as well.
Okay, and you have that spread over like a 6 month time period? Is that constantly updated?
It's constantly updated because, for example, I made a sample last week and it's a striped top. The price of the striped top went up drastically because not people know this, but when you make a striped top on the front and back, the stripes need to align. A lot of people don't know that, and for that to happen, there's a lot of fabric wastage, because they need to cut it exactly how it is on the front and not the back. So that changes your prices, and like you need to essentially think, do I actually want to proceed with this strap top? So yeah, there's a lot of leeway and like tweaking. It's ever evolving. That's the best way to put it. Yeah.
Good. So I want to go back to something we touched on a bit earlier when you were mentioning about you get up in the morning, you send some messages to various production managers across the world.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about your morning routine, and obviously it sounds like you get quite a few tasks done in the morning.
Yeah.
So talk us through, like, how does a typical morning look like for you?
Okay, so morning, I literally reach over to my phone, left hand side. I get onto WhatsApp and I speak to Issa, and I'm like, what's going on today? We're usually talking about something, so I'm like, okay, I've seen like, let me just give you some context here. So
Olu's actually getting on his phone right now to actually prove this is all true and not just make believe.
So we're currently talking about hats, and it's so granular. It's down to what type of buckle do you want on the back of your hat. There's 100 types of buckle closures you can have, like strap closure, clasp closure, 100. So every hat or every item of clothing is broken down to such a granular level. It's not as easy as just like, I'm going to create that, because you have to think about fabrics. Then when you pick a type of fabric, you have to think about washing instructions. You have to then get it printed on a particular label to then get sewn in. Then you have your brand label, which needs to get sewn in. So like every item of clothing has 5 projects within it, if that makes sense.
Wow. Yeah.
So you have to design your labels as well as
for
the fabric.
All each individual items.
For each item,
all these sub items that you actually need to design.
Because I've got one cotton, one poly cotton, one wool. I can't just use a generic wash label across all of that. So yeah, it's a lot more intricate than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
But
so you do that in the morning then, and you're probably having 2-3 conversations with a couple of different people.
Yeah. Like concurrently, there's another guy as well. There's a few. There's quite a few in here.
And then so after that you've sorted out your micro level details pretty much.
Yeah.
What does your morning look like from there?
So after that, then I start looking at. Currently, I'm looking at the rollout for like the marketing plans. So I'm pulling together like imagery. Just like designing some basically marketing material. That's currently what my mornings look like now. So once that's done, tea, and then on the way to work.
No time for breakfast.
I have breakfast when I get into work. Which is
I'm hoping you shower up in the morning.
Sorry. So yeah, obviously I get out of bed. I obviously do generic cleanliness, sanitation.
Straight into work. Got to deal with business.
Just
to the office.
Literally
straight working all the way.
Straight all the way. But yeah, I might be on the train as well, checking replies and stuff like that. Yeah. But yeah,
I have to say actually that for me personally, and obviously everyone's different, that doesn't work, because I've noticed that if I wake up in the morning and I jump straight into some sort of work stuff, that changes my mindset straight away. I'm just constantly thinking about that throughout, and I personally feel I don't have as productive a day as I otherwise would. So my morning's completely different, where I do not want to think about work stuff for like the first hour and a half to 2 hours, and I'll do exercise in the morning, I'll do my prayers, I'll get ready, everything like that, and then that's when I'll look at something. So I don't want to look at anything before that, just because I feel that for me it puts me in not the best mindset that I want to be in for the day. Like I really want to be energized and raring to go before I read that first email, whereas if I open up my phone and I read that first email, then I'm starting to think, okay, how do I need to respond to this? What do I need to do? And that kind of derails me from the day. I'm not in that same mindset.
I see what you're saying, but I have a massive time constraint.
Of course. You're in
if I miss that window of opportunity, I might not speak to it for 2 days.
You have that dependency there.
Yeah, and 2 days turns into effectively a week. So that pushes time is very critical in the situation.
Yeah, that's, I guess, when you're working globally and internationally as well, you got to take time zones into consideration. Exactly. That's just a reality.
Because I might be up at 1 a.m. messaging him, which is a perfect time for us to be directly talking to each other. But that can only last so long because I need to go to sleep.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's
wake up for work.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes it's good to get really late at night and really early in the morning. That's the window of opportunity for the Chinese market.
you know, if you got to deal with time zone stuff, then you obviously got to change your routine to work for that. And obviously that's part of the sacrifice that you mentioned earlier that you have to make, is that you're not going to get that straight, you know, 7 to 9 hours sleep that
don't get much
people
sleep,
hope to get.
The luxury of sleep is a luxury in that. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Great. Is there anything else you want to add? Any other advice, tips or tricks, or anything that people might find interesting or useful?
Tips and tricks, yes. Ooh, good question. I did not think that through. I think forums like this are really good because I'm like verbalizing a lot of things that I haven't really verbalized before. So it makes me think, like, retrospectively. I think, yeah, forums like this are really good. Tips and tricks, I would say, but yeah, just to recap, always surround yourself around people that are on the same journey as yourself.
Absolutely.
Tips, do you really want to do this? Ask yourself 10 times that.
That's like a word of caution.
Yeah, I was like, do you really, really want to do this? And even then, you don't know until you actually start doing it. So that would be one of my tips.
Something I want to add that we obviously spoke about at length earlier is know your why.
Yeah.
Figure out your why.
Yeah.
Because that's strongly going to be, do you want to do this? But why are you doing this in the first place?
Deciding factor. Yeah. And I think just be surrounded with people that love you, because you're going to be seen as a guy that is in his own head on a mission, irregardless of anyone else's emotions.
Yeah.
But it's all about the bigger picture.
Great. And where can people find your clothing, find you? Where are your channels?
Cool. So Furisto.London. So FURISTO.London. Everything's on there. All the social medias, all linked up on there. Yeah, pretty much.
Great. I'll have the link in the show notes for this episode. So you can obviously check out Olu and Furisto London, and obviously if you like his stuff, be sure to drop a little purchase there.
We can also work out a discount if you mention the Grafter Show. So yeah, if you do that, just let me know. We can work something out.
Any chance you could set up a promo code or anything for the showers?
Yeah, just let me know.
Awesome. So watch out for that. We'll obviously do some social media posts for that. So definitely follow us, and we'll see if we can hook something up for our listeners. Definitely. Fantastic. Great. So that's been an episode today for The Grafter Show. Obviously, you can find us on Instagram at The Grafter Show, and we also have a website, thegraftershow.com, where you'll find this episode as well as our other episodes as well. Keep listening, and obviously have a good one. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Grafter Show. I hope you found this really interesting and motivating. I certainly did, from a business and clothing perspective. Olu had some great insights into what he does and how he goes about his creativity in order to achieve his goals. You can find Olu's company Furisto on Furisto.London, on all the social media channels if you just search for Furisto. I'll be sure to link them in the show notes below as well. You can find us on www.thegraftershow.com and also on Instagram at thegraftershow. New episodes are released every fortnight, and you can subscribe to us as well on iTunes. Thank you for listening.